Thank you, Digital Megaphone Hope. This is great. Rick Wyan at Kellogg is one of the senior directors on our team, and he brought me in to get to know what Digital Megaphone is doing, and immediately we thought of Pringles. I get to work on the really fun stuff at Kellogg. I was previously in beer marketing, and I just moved over to snacks. So beer and snacks is pretty good for your career. I work on all of the brands in the Kellogg snack portfolio, as well as our frozen foods. But Pringles probably has my heart, that or Cheez-It. And we get to do some really fun stuff. So today, what I wanted to do is talk you through a case study of a Thanksgiving dinner that Pringles launched last fall, and then talk about some insights in what drives a story that gets buzz, and how you can kind of reverse engineer your marketing campaign to get a little bit more buzz, what works in earned media and in social. So when I say earned media, it's another phrase for PR, but we've started using that phrase because if you think about social media and somebody who is opting to share something from a brand, you're essentially earning their credibility as well. You have to earn it not just with journalists anymore, but with the general population and people active on social. So you may hear me use earned in a phrase that traditionally maybe I would have said PR or publicity. Okay, so Pringles. Show of hands, who has never had a Pringle? Okay, great. Love this room. Pringles has a global presence. In addition to the favorites that you might know, like sour cream and onion and cheddar cheese, those have been around forever. There are some really wacky flavors that people love around the world. In China, there's seaweed, or seaweeds in Ireland. There's prawn cocktail in China. There's extra hot from Mexico. It's actually launching right now here in the US. So literally any flavor you can dream of, Pringles can make. In fact, for the last 5 years up to 2017, Pringles actually released limited edition holiday flavors. So this is just an example. These were the 2016 flavors: pecan pie, sugar cookie, salted caramel. Other ones were like milk chocolate, white chocolate peppermint, definitely indulgent flavors that no one really associates a potato chip with. Last year, though, the team decided not to move forward with the holiday flavor. And really, these flavors were giving the brand a boost of buzz around the holidays, where people are actually stocking up on snacks to keep at home. When their family comes to town, all your college students come back, you gotta stock up on snacks. So we were talking about this with our PR team and saying, there's not going to be a flavor this year, when our brand director decided to give a challenge and said, we can make any flavor you want. And so our PR team took that back to their office and decided to dream up something that would get some buzz around the holidays. Thanksgiving is a super traditional time. Christmas is a pretty traditional time. Hanukkah. The foods that you eat for those meals are usually the same thing every year. And people love that about it. But when we started looking at those different holidays between November and December, there's one holiday where the menu pretty much stays the same, despite whatever December holiday you might celebrate religiously. And that is Thanksgiving. So working with the team, we developed a Thanksgiving dinner. So our objective was to increase talk value and talk about Pringles and kind of compete with is that the laptop going? All right, if it's not bothering anyone else, we'll just carry on. And create a culturally relevant story for the brand around Thanksgiving. So what you'll see today is that we actually created an entire Thanksgiving meal made out of potato chips. There were 9 flavors, and the idea behind it was Thanksgiving is a really busy time. Not everybody can get home. And if you can't get home, hey, why don't you bring some Pringles with you? So this was it. It was purposely meant to look like a kind of retro TV dinner of yesteryear. You pulled open a sleeve, and in it you saw 9 little stacks of Pringles waiting for you. The flavors were stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, mac and cheese, turkey, original, and there might have been like 1 or 2 more in there. Cranberry sauce was in there, and I think pumpkin pie. So you had a little dessert in there too. And the interesting thing about it behind is Pringles actually launched a campaign last year around flavor stacking. So it's this mind-blowing idea that if you take three different flavors of Pringles, you can actually create like a menu item. For example, a buffalo Pringle original and cheddar is like a buffalo wing that you would get from a restaurant. So we actually made stacks too. So what you see down there is the leftover sandwich, which is turkey stuffing and mashed potatoes. So we went all in on these flavors. They actually tasted really good. Green bean casserole was probably the most polarizing one, but people overall really enjoyed them. So now that we worked with R&D to do this, what were we going to actually do with it? So we had to get it in the hands of buzz makers. So we made a list of top media as well as top influencers. We focused in on sports personalities who might be playing in a football game the day of Thanksgiving or the day before or after. They maybe don't get a chance to make it home. Sports commentators, as well as YouTube personalities who specialize in like unboxing videos, as well as media, late night, and then food media, online, social media. And we sent it out. We sent it out like 4 days before Thanksgiving. That was not the plan. Innovation took a little longer than we wanted to, but it actually worked out really well for us because it gave it such a limited window for media to cover it. They either had to cover it right then or they didn't. And luckily for us, they did. I'm gonna kind of show you. This is kind of the plan in a nutshell. I pretty much talked it through. We held back about 20 trays for reactive opportunities. And that was really key for us because once you start seeing the buzz online, we actually had media and influencers coming to us asking if we had any more. So I'm going to play a little video. We submitted this to an award show. It kind of overviews the program and gives you a little bit of a flavor for what we did.
We're going to turn the sound back on.
We're going to turn the sound back on.
Okay.
Okay.
Pringles is an underdog in the salty snack category. Our competitors are double the size and spend. To break through, we had to increase Pringles' share of voice. So we couldn't approach this as business as usual. Instead of just marketing a brand, we built an entirely new product. Introducing the first ever Pringles Thanksgiving Dinner. A meal made up of...
It's turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing,
mac and cheese, cranberry sauce,
creamed corn, green bean casserole, and pumpkin pie.
Seconds, please. For those who can't make it to a home-cooked meal, they're practical and stackable. Whatever dinner table you found yourself at, the conversation took off.
If you can't afford the cover charge at your family Thanksgiving meal, you could always buy some Pringles.
It's amazing that we live in a world where this exists.
People everywhere were singing Pringles praises. Literally.
I'm having Pringles, 8 delicious flavors. Who needs turkey and mashed potatoes?
Everyone wanted a taste. So, in the spirit of giving back, we auctioned one off on eBay, with the proceeds going to kids in need. When the plates were cleared, our results spoke volumes. Dollar share almost doubled. Social conversations increased by 11%. And we garnered 1 billion impressions, equating to over $2.5 million of free media, baby. During the tastiest holiday of the year, our throwback 1970s style packaging and breakthrough idea helped Pringles be served up as the main dish, without even consulting an oven.
Our cost? Oh, we can talk about that at the end a little bit. It was actually pretty efficient. Innovation was so excited by the idea, they leaned in a lot. The crisps were hand seasoned, meaning someone put the seasoning on each Pringle. It was hand packed, and that was actually a learning I'll get to at the end. Is we couldn't make this available for retail with the lead time that we did it. The food testing and the packaging and the quality that it would need to hit your local grocery store, that was something that drove a bit of a frenzy because there were literally 100 made. It's something I'm going to talk about at the end, but it's a learning for us on how we look at next year's holiday. Okay, so a whole lot of coverage. It was really exciting. It was a wild ride. Our CRISPR is our PR agency. They help with all of our Kellogg's brands. I think they were working like 20 hours a day, getting all of the media in and fielding inquiries. It was really exciting. What I want to talk about now is how did we connect what was happening in the earned media world with social and vice versa. So what I think is really interesting about the landscape we live in right now is that we actually hear from journalists and media and online editors that they go to social to find what's hot. And same thing with even like stalwarts of media industry like the Today Show. Those editors are looking in social feeds on Twitter and they're pulling news stories from there into traditional shows, but vice versa. So when something is catching fire in digital earned media, we see it then, as expected, shared in social media feeds. So when we think about this symbiotic relationship, how can you design a story that can work in both? I always like to say that good content for a paid social post, it shouldn't really feel that different than the type of content that you might send out to support an earned story. Because if it's interesting enough for media to cover it, consumers are probably going to love it too. So we see a lot of shared content between what technically is done in the PR earned world and what we're currently doing now in our social media feeds for our brands. So I want to take a few minutes and talk about this and talk about what we leveraged for this Pringles story. Our CRISPR team always has these principles. Our lead strategist always tells me she keeps them up in her cube. And the idea here is that there are a couple things you can do when you're telling a story about the brand that give it that little sizzle that we know gives it earned appeal. Obviously, timeliness is really important. Like I said, we didn't plan to send those trays out like 4 days before Thanksgiving, but it ended up working in our advantage. So if the story is happening now, they can't shelve it. They can't say, oh, I'll cover that next month. So if you can design something that's so time-bound that it has to be talked about right now, it puts you at a serious advantage. Second, personal impact. You saw a little bit in there that we actually auctioned off one of our remaining trays on Giving Tuesday. We had like a couple left and consumers were telling us how much they wanted it. So we put it up on eBay to benefit No Kid Hungry, which is the Kellogg partner of ours. And I think it sold for like, I don't know, $1,500 or something. It was kind of crazy for the tray of Pringles, but it gave a little bit of that giving back story, the personal impact there. Prominence, this is like your classic, you have a celebrity tied to your campaign or you have done something very notable with someone of significance in their industry. Proximity. I love this one because I get sucked into them. They're like the surveys you see posted on Facebook, and it's like the top 3 cities for, late night snacks, or they take this survey and they like slice and dice it across the world and you can pitch that out and it has like a very strong local angle. So anytime you can localize a story, that gives it that earned hook. Tension. Obviously, we know this in the world we live in, but anytime you can highlight a little bit of tension around your brand, I think you start to see people talking about it because they take a side. And we saw that. Like, people were eating the Pringles on air, like on the Fox News segment, and they were like saying, no, this one's the best. No, this one's the best. How can you think that? So, I mean, it was like dream coverage, but it came from the taste testing tension of favorites. Surprise is important. That little twist on it that makes you say like, what? I can't believe they did that. That's crazy, or that doesn't make any sense. There's something to it that is unexpected. And then finally, change. I think you could argue Pringles was a little bit in this space, but I think it's more of surprise. Change is when you take a very old story and you give it new life. So obviously timeliness was key for Pringles. We know that. It worked to our advantage. That innovation was a little slow. Surprise. Nobody thinks Pringles has a right to, 1, make a Thanksgiving flavor, or 2, kind of play at Thanksgiving. And then tension. Like I said, we really saw those opposing viewpoints start coming together, not only in earned media, but we saw it in social too. So what did we learn? We learned a lot about this. We learned a lot about the innovation process. I'm fairly new to Kellogg, so this was like a few months after I started. So that was a really good learning just in general of what we can do with this brand as we think about the future. But we reacted and responded was the number one thing that we did well. I mentioned we held back some of these trays so that we had them for like big opportunities that popped up. If we would have just filled out our list and sent them to everybody, we really wouldn't have had any when, like, I forgot what late night show, one of them called and like asked for more. Second thing with this, I don't know if you noticed that British guy singing a song about Pringles Thanksgiving Dinner. Well, he didn't get a tray. He lives in the UK somewhere. He saw the story and social media, and he tweeted this song to us. And so we asked him if it was cool if we dubbed the lyrics so people could understand it and put our little bouncing logo on there, and then we shared that out on our social media. So totally random, super fun, but he was game for it. I don't even know if we were able to send him a tray because he's not in the US, but he loved kind of playing along with the brand, so we monitored for that and reacted. Leveraging additional moments in time. As I mentioned, Giving Tuesday has actually gotten a lot more attention in the last couple years, and it was super turnkey. We asked No Kid Hungry if they could just put it on eBay for us, and they managed the whole thing, and it was a nice little pop. I think we got a couple extra stories out of it, and not to mention it sort of was a bit of a feel-good moment, which is really important for Kellogg. So how will we get better? So I talked about sending out to influencers. We did focus a good portion of our list on athletes. For whatever reason, I would say this wasn't as much of a hit for us. We didn't really see any chatter come back. Part of it is I think they have such a big, crew of people before the mail actually hits them. So, I mean, who knows? The publicist never could have gotten it to them. It could be still in an office, in a box somewhere. Who knows? But our thought there was that they might be able to talk about the dinner since they can't get home for the holidays. But I think that was just, that wasn't really as true as we thought it might be going in. So I think for next year, we would think about more media influencers as well as YouTube. YouTube was amazing. These unboxing videos, if you haven't seen them, are really crazy. They have them for literally anything, mascara to toys to Pringles Thanksgiving Dinner. People opening up and seeing the surprise of what's inside. So any product could be sent to somebody as long as it's exciting enough inside that it would make it appear on their channel. So that was an untapped one, I think, that we'll explore more across the Kellogg funnel. And make it available to everyone. So like any good thing you do, there's some haters, right? So we got a lot of like, why can't it be available? Why can't I buy it? And we wish we could have made it for everybody. But the quality probably would have suffered. We couldn't package them in the typical Pringles can. There's a reason they're packed that way. It's so your chips aren't all broken. As well as the freshness because they were hand seasoned. So that was a big learning for us. We're talking right now about opportunities to make it available to consumers. Now that doesn't mean we're gonna produce 2 million of these trays. That actually is the wrong strategy. This would never be viable in all the grocery stores across America because the wow and ill factor is a little bit of what makes it work. But we're looking at partners like Jet.com, Amazon.com, some of our e-commerce partners, as well as some key retailers who we could maybe put it at for next year. It might not look like Thanksgiving. It might look like something else where maybe it's not a tray, maybe it's cans. I don't know. We're working all that out right now with our partners. But that was a huge learning, is that the media told us we absolutely love it and we want to cover it, but we can't tell our readers to get it. So we knew that going in, but it was really kind of a key learning for us on the outset. And with that, I think I have 9 minutes, so I would love to answer some questions if there are any from the audience.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm just curious, you talked about timeliness as being one of the key factors to a successful campaign. And obviously your original intent wasn't to send it out 4 days before. What was the planned timeline for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we intended to send it out about 10 days before, and that would have given us 2 weekends of coverage, and basically got us out of the Thanksgiving week a little bit more. But it didn't, we got the key weekend leading into Thanksgiving, but we didn't get anything before that, but it was fine. Doesn't always work out that way. So I can't share the exact agency cost, of course. And like I said, R&D invested.
Production costs, combination of agency costs, return on investment.
Yeah, so I can't share, I can't tell you it was $5. It wasn't $5, but I can't tell you a dollar amount. I can tell you it was probably the least expensive thing we've done on Pringles in the past 2 years. It was a turnkey idea presented from the agency. It really didn't involve that much creative time other than the packaging. And then some of the scenes you saw from the video I showed was like this run and gun social video that the agency created. And then for us, we really had just a few dollars of paid because it was driven by earned media. We didn't have to save hundreds of thousands of dollars to put paid behind it. We did a little bit when it started to get steam, but it was never intended to be a large program that was going to be pushed out via paid. So it was pretty inefficient. It was pretty efficient, and the ROI was huge. I think our CPM was like 10 cents or something. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's mics. I'm sorry.
Can you talk a little bit about the the total number of influencers that you ended up employing, and what platforms actually popped for you the most, aside from the YouTube?
Yeah, no, YouTube was by far and away the biggest platform. And then we saw a ton of conversation on Twitter. And that was because of the amplification that comes from news outlets sharing the story and then people retweeting. So those were the two top ones. We intentionally picked some Instagram people who were high in Instagram, thinking they might post photos of it or even do Instagram stories. We just didn't really see that happen. Oh, great.
I got one now. Did you notice, since it wasn't available in stores, that there was a boost just in the flavors in general, or was there people suggesting flavors, kind of like the Lay's do us a flavor, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we did see a sales boost around the time, which we attributed to the fact that Pringles was in the social conversation, and it was a reminder to kind of stock up for the holiday weekend. So we actually didn't suggest, like, we know you can't get mashed potatoes, but try X. We didn't do that because we didn't want to highlight the fact that it wasn't available to consumers, but really it was Pringles was like the, coming through, and I think it was that the reminder cue when people went to go shop. I don't know who has the mic.
A question. While the product was not available to consumers and therefore there were no sales to track, did you see a lift in sales the following quarter or that quarter?
Yeah, that's what I was just alluding to a little bit. We did. We saw that sales doubled for the same time period the year before, and we attribute that to the brand mentioning and the brand in conversation and the halo effect that had at retail.
Flavors internationally. Is this something that you're looking, because there's different holidays in different parts of the world, is this something that Pringles considers doing on a global level as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if everyone was able to hear, but she asked, would we ever do this globally? So interestingly enough, we saw our counterparts in the UK put out an advent calendar like a week before we were putting out our Thanksgiving. And part of that's just the nature of a giant company like Kellogg is not everybody has all the wires connected all the time. So we saw it and we were like, hey, what are you doing? We have the dinner coming out. So it was fine. The UK media didn't really halo over to the US, but this idea of unexpected flavors and what we like to call incredibly accurate flavors that Pringles can bring to life is definitely something that we're harnessing globally. They just hired, the brand just hired a new global marketing lead, and one of his tasks is figuring out when there are these flavors like seaweed in Ireland, how do we leverage that passion there for that flavor? Does it play in other parts of the world? Do you create an experience where someone could go and taste every flavor of Pringles from around the world? There's so much you can play with once you get through the FDA regulations of the formulas and all that other fun stuff.
Thank you.
So yes, absolutely. It is a global brand, so we want to play around with it when we can.
You said a phrase, the U factor, which I loved, and you just breezed right past it. What's that conversation like internally?
Yeah. It's easy, actually. The Pringles team is probably the most risk-taking team in Kellogg, so we're lucky about that. The brand director totally gets it, and he would go to bat with anybody who was like, green bean isn't going to taste great. And some people thought green bean tasted amazing. But I think the initial oh, why do I want a chip that tastes like turkey, is kind of what makes it interesting and makes you want to try and see. And then the surprise of like, oh my God, it's actually delicious. So that ew factor, which is totally, I think it does play a role in food these days. If you look at like the crazy variations of things that are hitting shelves, people want to try it and they're okay with knowing it's not always going to be the best, but they tried it, and especially if it's limited edition. So Pringles launches all kinds of crazy flavors each year. Like last year we introduced Top Ramen, which was made out of it was made to taste like ramen noodles. So there may have actually been a little bit of ill factor in that. It sold out in like a month. So I think there's something to that. If you're in food and if you're a CPG brand, how can you harness that with your product?
I am in CPG food, so I know it didn't go to customers necessarily, but how did you get through regulatory, legal, et cetera, just making this even for those 100 kits to go out to people, because you can still be very liable for what happens with that? Yeah, that's a great question. So the two big concerns were the seasoning and the freshness of the food. The freshness of the food, it was more of like, there's a risk that it's not going to be fresh. And we were like, yeah, it's basically made and we're sending it out within like 10 days. And so that was a risk that the brand was willing to take. There were no freshness concerns. They tasted great. The seasonings were something that innovation had to work through to make sure that those were, everyone internally was aligned to the fact that it was a controlled group. Because it wasn't sold to customers, we were not beholden to the type of regulations that submitting those formulas and all of that would normally require. That was actually the limiting factor of why we couldn't get it to consumers, and so we're trying to work through that this year, but it is really cumbersome. We have great partners in legal who are actually really strict, but sometimes they understand the business opportunity, and the brand really is the one who has to make the call on if they're comfortable with the risk or not. It's a risk reward. Some brands won't play at all. Some brands will. Awesome. I finished 1 minute under. Thank you guys. You've been great.